Hello, hello everyone. How's it going? This is your boy Leon LeGray. Now, bringing you the latest and greatest of the podcast. And today, I want to go ahead and give you the 200th episode of my podcast. So, yes, that's right. I've made now over 200 episodes of the Leon LeGray podcast. And today is a special day for the podcast. And I wanted to go out and just start out my 200 podcast with a bang. Just giving you the details where I've been and moving forward with my podcast. And hopefully, I can cut the gaps of what I should be doing and not having to make so many gaps within each and every other month. So trying to break the habit of doing so, only because, for one, I've been in question about where my podcast should go. And think about this is that a lot of things about where things have gone in the last couple months, and just the fact that so much has happened to me, and I figured in a state of mind, I needed to fix myself and get some things going. Even though I had so much of my time to make episodes after episode. And so to me, I've thought about this really well about what I wanted to do with today's episode and what I wanted to do. And so far, this is what I wanted to do and tell you guys about how to make a podcast and how to create your own very own podcast. Either it's video or audio. And so today, I'm going to go over my times about my experience with creating a podcast, the process of creating a podcast, and so on and so forth too. And I think it's very important for people that is going to be creating content, get yourself out there. Don't be afraid to do it. Because as I started, I will tell you that, man, it's been quite of a ride. Creating content, doing stuff that I've made. And heck, I would say I've had some good amount of nice, colorful words to say to people out there, to the peoples. And as time went on, I could tell you one thing is whenever time I've created brand new episodes on my own podcast, I felt a lot more confident. And to me, I've had to go in and say, you know what? I love what I do, and I'm sure as hell not afraid of doing that thing called podcasting. And this was a couple years ago. Moving forward, I'll tell you one thing to the listeners that are looking to create a podcast of your own, and how to get over the procrastination and get yourself going with an episode. And that's what I'm going to tell you on today's episode of episode 200. And here's one of my experiences on this podcast. Let's roll it. Thank you for listening to the Leon LeGray podcast, giving you the latest and greatest in tech, giving you the scoop, insight, the reviews, and all the information that you need to know about technology. Here's your host, Leon LeGray. All right, people, and wanted to go out and share you a quick word of the sponsors. And today's sponsor is brought to you by Zennies. And I've been a sponsor with Zennies for many years. And if you guys don't know about Zennies, I think I may have just mentioned this back in the past. And I will tell you one thing about Zennies. Great glasses. Love the glasses. And I enjoy it. I've enjoyed the Zennies glasses. It is amazing. And I do plan on purchasing some more down the future. And I can't wait. And want to let you know that if you work in a computer, just like I, having Zenny's anti-blue light glasses is for you, is for me, and anyone that is working on the computer all day or just playing games all day in general. Doesn't matter. If you have bad vision, Zenny's will put the eye measurements, the lens measurements for you for your scene, and so that way you can just have that there embedded. So that's going to be an awesome thing to have when you are on. Not doesn't matter if you're on the desktop, but whether you are on the mobile. So with that said, check out Zenny's down in the description below, and make sure to click that link and support me right there. But with that all said and done, let us get into today's podcast, and let's get the show on the road. Okay, well, guys, coming in and starting in today's show, I figured episode 200 would be the best thing to ever bring out to all of y'all, and get that out of the way too. Because for me, the one thing I would say that is annoying for me with this current desk setup is the fact that um, the desk, it's not really what do you call it, stand what do you call it, it's not really a friendly desk to begin with, especially when you're putting you're setting up your microphone. It's not the best, but it should do at this point. And what I actually dislike the most working up on this desk is that it's very uncomfortable, and it can be very uncomfortable going and working on the desk like this, especially when you have two monitors and all that stuff. Now, however, you don't have to go extremely fancy like I do. Of course, you can still work on your podcast even for one monitor. So if you are a one monitor kind of guy or gal, just remember, podcasting is very simple. You can actually don't have to create your podcast via audio. Now I know YouTube. I mean, before the YouTube started to made it more podcast friendly, you had to post your podcast separately, and to me that was the most frustrating part about uploading every audio on YouTube, especially having to upload your audio podcast and then having to upload it on YouTube on a video format, which is a pain. Now, the best thing I would say YouTube has done in recent years, what I mean, especially with the migration, the podcast coming through YouTube Music now, is that you guys can listen to me via the via YouTube easily. And now, if you have an RSS feed or wherever you're using your podcasts, it doesn't matter if it's a Megaphone, Art19, Lip Sync, Buzzsprout, whichever hosting platform that you're using on. I I will say that things have become a lot more easier in the podcast world. Now, the free ones, I would be careful, especially with free ones. Now, I will say that there are some good freemiums out there, like Red Circle. And then the one I'm using is currently the one I work on my Substack, which is a newsletter, which pretty much something I support it all the time with everything I have to say. I dearly enjoy about Substack, which is a newsletter platform in a form of posting notes. So, which is basically like Twitter in that sense. But then with that right there, it is really cool. To also not just post your Substack notes, which is a short form version, or post up your newsletters, send it out to your fans out there, and then which Substack has done in recent years, where you could have your podcasts on there too. Which, if you guys want to send in a permanent 301 reroute, and so from whatever service you're using, you can go ahead and reroute it to Substack if you like, which is really good. And that way you don't have to start all over, and all your hard years of work is not it that way your years of work is not like ruined. Basically, this is doing a 301. When people say a 301, this is uh where you transfer all your hard work, especially when you've done your podcast for many years. 301 is really cool because let's say you want to find a cheaper hosting provider, you can reroute your podcast doing a 301. So that's what they call it. So that way, when that 301 is fully transferred to that new platform service, you can go ahead and use a 301. And that's one of the things I have to say I liked, because one of the very first uh, freemium wares. This was before I started using paid services. The freemium wares I've used was, um, gosh, this was before Spotify purchased it. I think it was, gosh, let me see. Trying to think. Oh yeah, that's right. Now we remember Anchor. So that was the first freemium service I've ever used. And one thing I say that in respects, if you're using a podcast service for the first time, and if you're not serious about it, then Anchor is for you, right? And now the good part is that you can still reroute your stuff outside of Anchor. And for some reason, it I don't know why, but it almost felt that you didn't own your podcast. Um, and one of the things I had to say about where with Anchor, this was before the Spotify purchased Anchor. So in a way, I have to say, uh, it was quite an experience. But I wanted to do some more research and look up other things I've personally wanted to use and do comparison by comparison, like shopping, basically. And to me, that's where I wanted to go, especially for my blogs, for my podcasts. There are things I've wanted to do, especially uh, in combination, especially with my work being as a tech commentator in general. I wanted to do things that it would be a lot more different. And even in the world of podcasting, there's people that are interested in listening to new, fresh voices out there. My takeaway, and not to give anyone youngsters a hard time like you trying to start podcasting. Bless you. I don't know how all of you are trying to make it through, but I wish you all the best for sure. But one of the things when you're podcasting, you got to ask yourself. One of the many few questions is, how is it different compared to so many podcasting folks are doing podcasting, especially as me as a tech commentator. I'm nothing new to the space talking about tech, and there's always been people that were pretty much OGs of the tech commentator space and are the content creating space. In fact, there was guys actually that inspired me to do podcasting. This was many years back, and the one of the very first podcasts I've ever listened to was Dig, DIGG. Now it used to be this active podcast where it went on and reading in their forums, people that posted up on dig.com, and I'm sure it's still a popular site today. It's still a popular forum. However, I don't think it's as big as it is today. I'm not sure what the community looks like now. And as I'm going through DIGG, and I'll tell you that the show basically was about two podcasters by the name of Kevin Rose and Alex Albert. And I remember the two hosts talking about the stories of the stories of the day, going through what was going on. It was a weekly show I've used to listen to during the mid 2000s, and then all the way through early 2010s, which they ended the show around 2011. And I love the show so much that I continued to subscribe to him for many years. And from that point, I remember that's where I wanted to get into podcasting. I personally like uh, putting myself out there as a podcaster, and knowing that one day I can give my my good rawness. Sometimes I throw in my sense of humor, and giving my own personality to people that wants to listen to, people that wants interesting facts about the tech world. That's the idea. I said, you know what? Well, I think there was a kind of a hit that why I wanted to start podcasting. And I think one of the good reasons I did started podcasting for me was I wanted to do something to shape something very different compared to the rest of those the boomers that were pretty much into television back then. They were just throwing in a bunch of their whole bias, especially a lot of the tech commentators. They were becoming a lot more political. I didn't care what was going on in that space. I thought, look, what the hell is going on? And so around 2017, and I remember during the heights of the whole Trump era, things I would say that there was a story that actually inspired me. In fact, I think there was a Google developer. He worked with Google for many years until one day they fired him because of a Google memo. James Damore. I'm sure some of you may have heard the story. Who knows? This story is pretty much faded out of existence, but you guys can look up James Damore. And it's a very famous Google memo and how he got fired for this. And it is interesting because one day it made me question about not also that story. I looked up the real facts about the story, and then one day, like the guys over at in one of the tech channels, she's and I remember to this day, and literally I'm not even going through the channels. And I remember he was this guy from California, right? I could tell he leaned it very left, right? And again, not I'm not trying to go all very political, but I remember one day he made a comment about something, and I don't know what it is, but I remember there was a time that where a lot of the commentators never got into politics. They never swung. They never like put inserted their 2 cents, right? And then one day I hear this guy, and he brought into like uh, these two folks as guests, right? And that's one thing I've remember that things were starting to change in the whole landscape, especially with tech media. And I decided, you know what? This is getting really annoying. I've I think the host, I think Leo something. I'll have to link his shows down. Again, now I'm nothing against the guy. I'm sure that who knows what it was, but I felt that they were just they were just going out a very biasy way, and I felt that things weren't really the same, and I felt that this is something so stupid, and I just felt they weren't really doing their own research on things that they weren't doing. In fact, when I used to listen to Leo's commentary, there are plenty of good commentators out there too, uh, ones that reported things, especially with the world of technology, and I felt that these old haggises I could put them, they were just under their own high horse, and then I suddenly felt I wanted to put things down the way I saw it, and end up doing my own research. And look, and by the time I find out about these things, and I said, you know what can I do to make things a lot more different, a lot more entertaining, a lot more spontaneous, something that no holds bar, and I can go after something. And so the Leon Luck Gray podcast was created a year after, and I decided, you know what, I wanted to do something a lot bit more different, and compared to the rest of the big uh, OZ folksy guy that were on in television many years ago in tech TV and in cable. By the way, these guys started around cable television before podcasting, so but I knew that in my own classic fashion, I said, let's get right into podcasting. And I remember I've had a couple of listens here and there. For it didn't pick up really quickly, but little by little, it started to pick up after a couple of episodes. People started to listen to me, like especially from people internationally and my in my home country in the U.S. of A. So it was really something that really picked up little by little, and I felt that this is getting interesting. I've actually had some good comments about the episodes along the way, and I've talked about motherboards. I've talked about this and that, and I can't say that I'm a professional of everything. No, and to me, my episode is not like a follow up episode, just like every other episode. To me, I wanted to follow. I wanted to put my sense of what's happening, parts of the world, and things of that matter. And I'm sure that I've gone through a little bit about crypto plenty of times in my episode, but I didn't want to go and talk about some almost the same things as always. And to me, as a podcaster, I've always had to learn how to take different approaches, especially in the world of podcasting. But that was something I wanted to do, is make new moves and make new strides. And even with episode 200, I figured this is a good thing to talk about, because a lot of you guys, I'm sure, in your minds that probably wants to start off a YouTube channel. Cool. And you guys want to start out doing podcasting. That's wonderful. And I will tell you right there is that with podcasting, it does take time and growth for people to come over and check your podcast out too. And is it possible to make money doing podcasting? The answer is yes, it is. It takes a lot of hard work, but you got to show effort that you, as a content creator, that are willing to make the work and push your podcasts. And when you create an episode, it's always going to be a market out there for people to listen to fresh voices, and not everybody is going to capture your podcast. In fact, there will be a time that people may not even find you instantly. They may have to do a Google search, DuckDuckGo search to find you, or whatever. And I realize one of the things I say over the years is that podcasting isn't easy. Now, I will say that in good old Anchor fashion, I did start it with a couple cents, and the highest I made in Anchor was $35 in Anchor, but that wasn't really much. But I decided, you know what if I can make the effort and make something happen to me? Now, there will be a time that you'll be reached out to sponsorships, and it will happen. You got to be patient first. First is first. Don't go out, quit your job, and say, I'm going to go and make a podcast. No. I don't think that's how it works. You have to learn how to keep a job first before you can ever quit something. Because I will tell you one thing is that getting into the game right now, first of all, you have about over 200, or maybe not. I can't say over 200 million, but 2 million podcasters are out, and then you have about billions of people trying to find good podcasters out there to listen to. And there is a good market out there too. Now, you got podcasters that are into the comedies, technologies and science, politics, religion, you name it. Or they do music talk, great. There's podcasting for dating or relationships, wonderful. There's a podcast subject out there for everybody, and this is cool, because I have to say there's some great stuff going out in the podcast world, and I used to listen to actively to podcast news, and I don't listen to it so heavily now because I got into so many different things, and I got so deep into other subjects that I got so lost into. And then recently I've gotten to crypto, in the crypto space, and I would say the little bit of the NFT space. But all that news will come and go, and that you get lost within the 24 cycle news stuff too. That comes and goes, and so whatever you create, stick what you like. Make sure that you bring that audience with you too. Now, if you believe in the topics you love talking about, you go for the topics what you want to bring out to listeners. And I always felt and believed that if you want to bring your audience, you want to have bring people over and have people listen to your show, you gotta learn how to attract those people to come into your show. And yes, there are. I've heard many podcasts out there. I've heard crime show podcasts. I've heard video game podcasts, worship podcasts. I've listened to plenty of podcasts out there. In fact, there's podcasts for anyone that's trying to make a podcast. They're like how-to stuffs. So this is cool. I love the fact that you get to learn a lot about podcasting by listening to other people out there too. So there's a point that you can get yourself educated in certain topics, and a lot of people are getting to podcasting. I believe just as much as people listening to music in general. In the over the years, you've had I would say over the years, when I learned about podcasting, Apple I would say Apple was one of the first distributions, because everybody had iPods at the time, and I remember there was a time that people ended up downloading podcasts. There was downloads, but now today you got, I would say, a mix between downloads and streaming a podcast. So it's kind of a fair 50-50. Now, if you don't want to stream a podcast, I know because of internet issues, what I like about downloading a podcast is that if you are interested in that podcast, you could download it, listen to it on a later time. One of the best things too. One thing I can tell you is that if I ever had something to listen to offline, I would love to purchase a iPod Classic. That's just me. Maybe I'm just a little bit old school on this too. Now, you guys don't have to purchase a podcast, because I believe they're selling iPod Classics for actually a lot more money on eBay, since it's pretty much a vintage. But you don't have to have a iPod anymore. iPod Classics are going for a lot more money. I don't think it's even worth taking your wallet just for an iPod at all. What I would do is you can still you can still go out and just get a phone and get an app that your favorite podcasting app of your choice. In fact, the apps that one of my favorite apps I listen to is Podverse, Podverse, Podverse. So one thing I like about Podverse, just me in general, but you can download whatever podcast service of your choice, and I think it's cool that there are so many choices out there for podcasts, for podcasting apps for listeners. And way I take it is awesome to download your stuff, listen to it offline. You don't have to be constrained about, how should I listen to that podcast? Where should I stream it? And yes, streaming is a choice, and I do pick up numbers and analytics through my analytics pages through other platforms, which is still cool. I like that option. And which, by the way, even today, you can find me pretty much anywhere from Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple. Even today, I remember there was a time that if you want to listen to podcasts, you have to go through iTunes client, the best part about Apple now, I would say, in respects with Apple recently, they've have now you can listen to your Apple Podcast not just on iTunes anymore. I think, and personally, I think the iTunes app is pretty much a relic of its time, and you really don't need to have iTunes. Thankfully, they've released Apple Podcasts on the web, a web version for it. Hallelujah. Yay. And actually, I like that option right there too. I think is exciting. As exciting as it is, that's so cool. Now, if you still have Apple iPods, iPads, iPhones that you still you if you're still going to use iTunes to back up your stuff, your iPhone through iTunes, sure. I think you can keep the iTunes client on your Windows. Absolutely, sure. There's probably still a reason to do that, but I think it's about time when Apple did something like that. It's like, oh, thank goodness, because there are still Apple users out there listening to podcasts, and I think a lot of podcast listeners don't have to go and listen to you on an Apple Podcast app and download the app and do that. In fact, they can just go into their desktop. If they're sitting down, they can just listen to you right on a brand new tab. And it's good. I like it. I personally think that there are some things that what the podcast world has done to improve, and there's still many more things coming up fresh for the podcast space, which is super super important because, very honestly, as a podcaster, you got to know that what you want to do to make yourself shine to audiences. And if this is something fresh people want to listen to and something that you can bring something educational, and the code word, and what I'm going to say again is something refreshing and something educational. And so if you got something in value that you're telling to the audience, uh, people want to find something new from you, and always bringing something fresh to the table that nobody is even saying something. It matters, and if they see that you got something good to say, people will come, people will subscribe. And to me, what I've missed the most, I think, over the years is the worst part of about a podcaster. And sure, we have our times that we don't get to record every single week. We got busy lives, and sure, I think the worst part about even for me stopping was the part that I miss out on the days where I wanted to continue doing podcasts, and I screwed up, and I will say that it was all on me that I've screwed up and not continued to podcast, because people are always gonna ask, hey, when are you gonna put up a new episode? Where are you? Things like that too. And I've noticed that there are people out there that still listens, and if you've gone way too long without posting, people are always gonna find out, and it's true. And I've had my fair share of people that actually they've asked, hey, when's your new episode gonna be posted? I said, I don't know, man. I've been working hard, stuff like that too. I think the best thing, even if you're on a what's the word you're basically on like a podcast block, and you cannot get anything done, make sure to put something in Word, but write it down in a word processor, or on write it down on a note to get, if you have some new inspiration, write it down. Grab a notepad and start writing, because there's going to be inspirations that will come in your way, and that will be something that you might want to do. If it comes up, put it down on your phone memo and have things recorded. Something will come up to you one of these days, is that, man, I gotta get something going. And there you go. You got something that will inspire you to create brand new episodes. And because one thing I can tell you as a podcaster, a content creator, is you got to get something written down in stone, because you're never going to have all that in mind, because things will come in one ear and your thought process will come out of the other ear, and it won't save. So you have to save it even either on paper or by a word processor. My number two thing I will put out, something that I would say as a podcaster. So this is number two. Carefully, I would say is, if you make an episode, make sure you back it up. Now, you have you have a show, and I know that with the today's world, with the low media uh, entities people have, especially with clickbait, a lot of young creators, they tend to get away with things. I'm not gonna put all blame on you. I think there are guys out there that have make good content. I think there are really cool content creators out there. They got spunk, and they know what they're doing. Now, media literacy is something that you gotta practice, and make sure that if you're gonna create an episode, that's cool. But I think you gotta understand, when you've created an episode, make sure you back up your things, and make sure that what you do is very, very important, because I think it's always cool to know what you're saying, but I think you're gonna have critics that will even slam on you. Do think that this will happen. Even if you're a content creator, you be careful what you do, because you're gonna take the heat at some point, one way or the other. You're going to get the heat, and that's one of the things as a podcaster. Is some people will criticize you as, oh, you're not saying things the right way. Oh, or they'll probably criticize. It's not just your what you say is just as bad, but it isn't. Now, everybody has an opinion, and it's a good thing to have one as well. So don't be afraid to speak up upon it, and tell these critics to shut up your ass. And I have to say, I am a guy that is open minded, that knows what to say by the heart. And for me, a lot of people today are just spineless to say anything. And I fucking hate some of the people out there. And by the way, did I curse? Yes, I did. But in a way, I don't care. You gotta be a little bit much more mindful. Of course, be mindful what you say, of course, but then also learn how to speak up. And it's one of the things with podcasters. I know this is not going to be YouTube friendly. Absolutely, it's fine. But when it comes to your critics, be sure to take criticisms well. But if you are going to attack anyone, I think if you do, you've got to let your critics be your fuel, because otherwise this will build you up. I personally think so. And I remember I've had a friend of mine. I don't know even we're in talking terms anymore, but I remember he may have been pissed off with me with one episode, and he may have thought that I was very anti-American, and which is not true. I really don't think so. I don't think that is the whole case in point, but I remember this British friend of mine. He felt that I was talking pretty bad about my home country, which is really far from the truth. It's absolutely stupid, but it's what it is. And I've noticed that people will take things off the wrong way, but you gotta brush it off and say, look, I don't care what you think of me. I'm gonna say it. And to me, I see things in a very wrong direction, and I've been very vocal. I'm very critical about what I've said in my own past, and it's perfectly fine. And that's where, if you create content, you gotta learn how to face criticisms well enough too. And one of the things as a tech podcaster, and I think this goes on rule number two, even is microphone ethics. When you are talking or speaking to people, yeah, having a good voice matters. And and also the worst thing I didn't even do with this microphone is, I'm sure you guys can hear the plosives, which it's annoying, but having a plosive ball wouldn't be a bad idea. Having something to invest on it, to even having a good microphone is fine. And you, by the way, I think a lot of these creators with the SM7B microphones, like the radio microphones, and the people that you see on YouTube all the time using these expensive microphones, I think it's like over $400 microphones. I will tell you straight up, you don't have to have an expensive microphone. In fact, there's a lot of podcasters out there that would tell you just go get yourself an Audio Technica ATX, or a Samson Q2U, which is pretty much perfect in its own way. And these two microphones, those model microphones, still uses XLRs, and it uses USBs. So just mind you, those microphones are still really good microphones to use. You don't have to get anything expensive. You don't have to get anything over the top. In fact, I have a good microphone that I'm actually borrowing from. I actually sold my Samsung Q2U over a year ago. But I would say you can get anything. But if I had to recommend anything to anyone, is the Samsung Q2U. It's a cardioid mic, works great. But make sure that if you're starting out podcasting, don't buy an expensive mic. That if you buy the mic, you might want to use it. It's important to use something, invest on it, and make sure that you're using it for the long term. And that's one thing, is that if you start a show, you might want to start a show and continue on using that microphone until you build up income onto your podcast. That's one thing I can tell you right there, is work your way up. Don't buy the most expensive thing right off the bat. Even if you haven't started off, I say get the cheapest and work your way forward. I remember a time that I think the podcast world, they always want to know where is a good uh, point to where you can stop. Thing is, you can make your podcast long form or short form. There's no uh, there's no big difference. You can make your show as long as you want, or you can make your podcast as short as you want. Either way, it doesn't matter. As long as you got something cool to say, you got something you could say within that certain point. You could just make your episodes short and brief as possible, or long as possible if you want. If you got something you wanted to say, go and say it. Absolutely, too. Go all ham. And I think that's one of the big things about the podcasting space, really, is you just got to enjoy the journey. And you got to enjoy it. Because I know you're in the podcasting world, you're going to have definitely people that say, "Oh, your show is too short," or "Your show is cool and all, but I just think it was too long." And the thing is, you're never going to please everybody. You're just not, because. And here's one thing too. I'm a guy that enjoys creating long form formats only if it's really good. And to me, I like long form as long as the long form um, podcasts are to a point. And to me, my podcast isn't going to be over an hour long. And I remember I've talked to a guy. I remember my, uh, I remember one of my colleagues in my old work. He says, "Oh, podcasts supposed to be very long, you know," and I'm thinking, not really. It doesn't have to be. And the thing about that is that you got people that never have done podcasts in their lives, and they'll just say something that they think that they know what's right. And if they don't, if they haven't podcasted themselves, I don't think you should listen to those people. And I personally think that you should create the podcast you want. In fact, I've listened to podcasts as short as 30 minutes or 27 minutes because they've talked about things that was to a point. Like, in fact, I think it was a book review podcast. And their podcast isn't really long per se. But, you know, that format worked really well. And I would come back and listen to that podcast again if I get the chance. When I have one evening, if I have some time in my hands, awesome. If not, that's okay because the best thing about it is that you got so many people in the podcast space, and one thing I could say is you can. If this is your podcast, you are the creator. You got what it takes. You want to make it short and sweet. You go ahead. But if you want to make it long, like I've said before, go all ham. Continue on. That's the beauty of being a podcaster and doing what you want to say. It is absolutely cool. And podcasting can be for everybody, and you got what it takes to do that too. And because I always say that if you wanted to be a podcaster, be passionate about the topics you like to talk about. And I know it's very difficult because people say that, oh, I like to talk about this, but somebody have said stuff, the similar things that I've wanted to talk about already, so on and so forth. And you got a lot of people that make so many excuses not to put themselves out there. Or I think the best way I could say is that the people procrastinate a lot. People do not want to go forward full on because they felt that things were already done already from the get go. I don't think so. If you want to create it, go for it. And because there's people out there that wants to listen to you, and I feel that people forget that if you have talked, if even if the other person has talked about it, you may have a better perspective about that too, a better viewpoint than the last podcaster haven't touched on. I think you can create something as awesome, or if not even better than the previous person have said. And who knows, I could be wrong, but that's one thing is, and the way I put it is, podcasting is a form of art. You know, it has a there's a secret behind podcasting, and it's not like a big secret sauce. Anybody can podcast. You just gotta work on your chops, getting your lines right. If it's, well, let's say for instance, if your podcast is a big budget production podcast, if it's about role playing, if it's drama, it's like a drama series. Yes, you have to put everything in writing. That's one thing I could put down as a podcaster is if you got a web series and that's involved drama, then sure, work on your chops, work on the role that you're playing as this kind of that particular person. Do so because a lot of people out there, people are not just listening to just news anymore too, because it's a form of art, and there's a style where things are going with audio dramas now. Audio dramas are actually very very popular, and I'll tell you what, there's so many dramas that it's hard to keep up. What are the best dramas out there? I'm not sure what it is now, but you guys can find out yourselves which is the best audio dramas out there. So you can look it up. Last but not least is experience the journey, and one day, if you continue this for many months or over the years, which I've when I started podcast around 2018, which now it will be 2018, like 9 years. Yeah, 9 years for me. And I'll tell you one thing is it's been one hell of a journey, and it is very awesome. So go ahead and be the best as you can as a content creator, because there are room out there for new voices, new faces to be put out. So that's the conclusion I want to put out. So if you want to do it, I would say take a little time to do some research. What microphones you want to put a little money onto. Now you could still use your webcam if you want to. I think my issue with webcams is that it does pick up everything, but you got to make a decision if you want to use your uh, webcam microphone or purchase mic a separate microphone. To me, I prefer the separate microphone because it does pick up your voice really well, and a cardio microphone is really good compared to dynamic. Now, if you're singing, dynamic is not dynamic, but a Omni mic is really good, but a cardioid microphone is basically the best thing for single users. So if you're doing that, absolutely go for it, stick with it. And that's one thing I could say is enjoy it and make it. And then who knows, this will probably be your life's passion. For all I can say is enjoy the experience and move on forward. And that's about it, everybody. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me. It's been a very long time since I've created my podcast, and I've always wanted to get back into it, but now finally I'm putting myself out there. It's awesome. It's about time that I really need to get around to creating an episode. And today, that was the day I wanted to mark this down as my 200th episode about my experience as a podcaster. And uh, I've thought about this for several weeks now, and I figured this was about time to get myself going before things got too late and my podcast will end up becoming forgetful at this point. And I would say within this week by Friday, because I'm off Friday, and I'll make sure just to go ahead and get a brand new post out there. Because again, I don't think even for me working a job is even worth it in today's standards. This working this hard, but gotta pay the bill somehow. Gotta stick around and continue saving money. So that's why I just haven't been posting my podcast as regularly as much as I used to. But here I am now, guys. So everyone, thanks so much, and I hope some of the tips that I gave you worked out. So if you got any questions, be sure to email me or throw me a comments. That would be wonderful because I'll be able to write down to you as soon as I receive the messages. So, anyways, guys, take care. Have a great day wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Goodbye for now.